Councilmember Danuski?
Here.
Councilmember Curtis?
Excused.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Mayor Baker?
Who what?
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Present.
Councilmember Sperry?
Here.
Councilmember Herbig?
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If you please rise and join the Deputy Mayor in the flag salute.
Oh, you want me to say? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, and we're going to remove one item from the agenda, and that is the executive session at the end that we will not be doing. So with that change, if there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved as modified. Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. It's an opportunity for you to speak. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes on issues and items that are important to you and to the community. And this is not really a time for two-way dialogue. This is our opportunity to hear from you and what's on your mind. So, will the clerk please call the first person?
Anja Hellman? Oh, thank you.
Hello. Yes, I'm Anya Hellman. I am a resident here in Kenmore, and I'm also pastor at North Lake Lutheran Church right down the street. I'm coming to you, address 7427 Northeast 198th Place. Thank you. So I'm coming to mention, I've spoken with a few of you about this, but I and another resident of Kenmore are working on a project that we believe is a community building type of project that we would love your support on. So the project, I call it a confession board. It's something that was done last summer, I think, around Seattle. And King 5 actually did a news story on it. They came out, and there's a video of that, which some of you have. I'm hoping you can share it with the others. In that video is the best way to get a good idea of what the project is all about. Basically, it's a community building activity where there's a big board that is put up and people who are walking by read the instructions, and they can, if they so wish, take a card from it and write their own confession. It's kind of like an unburdening of their soul. So they can write this confession on the card and then hang it from the board, and then anonymously. And others, when they're walking by, then come by and eventually you see this board full of these confessions. And as people were interviewed who took part in this last time when they did this, they talked about it feeling very close to the people who have written it and feeling the sense of community in the activity. The way they did it before is they would put it somewhere without any notice. It would suddenly appear somewhere, and then on a different day it might appear somewhere else. So it would only stay in one place for one day. And that's the way I'm envisioning this, is that we would take it to different places in Kenmore. It would pop up somewhere for a day, go away for a little while, pop up somewhere else for a day, go away for a while. So this is something that I'm hoping to do in the month of this month and the month of March. I've already started talking with Third Place Commons, and they are interested, and we're talking about how to make it work there. I'm also looking at Country Village, and then I would love to have it at some places that are city-owned. So places like Log Boom Park or City Hall. There are some places that are county, so I'll have to figure out how to work that out with the county, like the library, Park and Ride, and any other ideas that you all have of places you think might work for this as well. So my understanding is in order to move this forward, there would need to be some city resources looking at this for the legal implications, and so that's why I'm bringing it to you in the hopes that it's something that will be backed by City Council and considered worthy of those resources. I think that's it.
Thank you, Pastor.
Chris Joel.
Hi, my name is Chris Jell. I'm the Executive Director of Imagine Housing. I'm actually a Bothell resident, but I am the proud parent of a Kenmore Junior High graduate and Inglemore High School graduate. I'd like to thank the city for its ongoing support of the Arch Housing Trust Fund as a regional approach to addressing the needs of affordable housing. Your ongoing support of the Arch Housing Trust Fund has assisted Imagine Housing in developing 13 affordable apartment communities serving over 1,300 residents. I understand that the city is considering their 2015 Arch Housing Trust Fund commitment to provide funding for our new project in Totem Lake. I would like to ask the city to authorize this use of the Arch Housing Trust Fund. As you are aware, rents are increasing and seniors are being priced out of the communities in which they live. The development of our apartment community in Totem Lake will provide 91 units of affordable permanent senior housing, including 20 units set aside for homeless seniors. As an aside, I participated in the one-night homeless count just a week ago, and I was shocked by the number of people I found in our own community residing in their cars at night. Wasn't planning on saying that, but just an aside. It is something that impacts all of us. The new housing will allow many seniors to continue to live in the communities where they live, where their services are, and families reside. Please authorize your funding support for Imagine Housing and the Arch Housing Trust Fund for our project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Doug Huxtable.
Hello again. It's been a while. But my name's Doug Huxtable. My current address is 532 Lake Street South in Kirkland. We sold our house of 37 years and moved to Kirkland. Our kids no longer reside in the close area. And to be honest with you, for future thoughts, the reason we moved was the walkability. Much better. So keep that in mind, especially for the Planning Commission. I am now a volunteer for Imagine Housing. Chris just gave you a brief rundown of the project you all are providing funds to Arch. And let me tell you, Arch is a wonderful organization. It's the Regional Coalition for Housing that the East Side has all gathered together and is sponsoring. As a volunteer, I can say I just wish Arch had twice as much funds. The need is really there, and this organization that came together through all the cities is working wonderfully. So that's something to keep in mind for next year when you're putting your budget together. I do want to thank the city, though, for your participation, for Mayor Baker's involvement, for the city council, and knowing how staff has to put all this together for you all. I really want to thank them for the diligent care in making sure that all this is moving forward. Your ongoing support of Arch has really assisted Imagine Housing in putting together these projects. The one that you all are going to be involved in is located in the Totem Lake area, and its benefit will spill over easily to Kenmore, Bothell, but I look forward to the time we can all be involved in a Kenmore activity. And to do that, I'm going to volunteer the staff at Imagine Housing to get involved, certainly with Nancy, but better yet, get a time where we can brief the City Council what some future plans are, what the needs are. They are real, and they are getting worse year for year. So I'm going to leave with Nancy some of the details, specific details on the themed project, which is the one you're all voting on tonight, and Imagine Housing. So hopefully either Chris or anybody else that you may be aware of at Imagine Housing can set up a meeting. We'd be more than happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huxtable. And it's very good to see you, and we certainly appreciate the time that you have spent on our Planning Commission and spent in the community. And thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're sorry to lose you.
There's no one else signed up.
Pastor Anya, thank you for bringing this to our attention. If you would want to send the link to that video to us, I think an email might be good. If there really are no objections from the council, if we could get city manager to give us an idea at some point of what we can do this. I know there's been recent Supreme Court decisions, and I know there's some roadblocks that we have as a governmental body, but if there's no objections, if we could get city manager sort of look at this and see what we could do to allow this.
So yeah, I was talking to Pastor Hellman earlier this afternoon, and I think she needs direction from us on whether we would like to have it on city facilities or not soon, because it's timed with some activities she's doing with her congregation that are coming up in the near future this month and next month. So I even talked about the possibility of getting direction at a future city council meeting later this month, and I think she actually wanted some direction tonight. What's involved with it is to be able to put it on city facilities are a couple things. Number one, we'd need to work with our public works operations manager to figure out where best to put them, at our park or at City Hall. Number two, we would need to come up with a policy that talks about this kind of thing, because we wouldn't want inappropriate things put on the confession board, and in order to regulate that or prevent that, we would need to have a policy in place first. So we would need to draft a policy, and I would want our city attorney's help with that. We could turn that around relatively quickly, but it is a resource that you would need to know would be expended on behalf of this project. The last issue has to do with a recent U.S. Supreme Court case on signage and the ability to regulate content. And City Attorney Kasaguma, I don't know if you would like to briefly talk about that?
The only point from the case that's relevant to our discussion is that if we are to establish regulations for the construction and location of this type of a sign, whatever regulation we impose has to be content neutral, meaning we can't make a distinction between the types of signs based upon what they say or what is posted on them. So we will take that into account when we, as Rob says, take a look at the policies the city should have to regulate inappropriate material that's on it, and then the location of it in relation to what other people can do with same types of signs.
And I think that may be the bigger picture, is we know what this one is, but if we pass the policy for this one, does that open a door for others, and we don't know what the consequences or the content will be.
Right. And we can't pay, as I said, we can't be passing a regulation that authorizes this and prohibits others based upon what is going to be posted on it or is stated on it. So that's a task for us to take a look at.
If I can just add one more thing, Pastor Hellman mentioned that they would be put up for just one day at a time, and they would be monitored by someone who would be near the sign, kind of within eye shot of the sign. So there would always be somebody there to monitor and watch what goes on.
I guess in a way I kind of hate to do this, because every time we suspend the rules, it comes back and bites us, but I see Councilmember Smith does have a question here. Normally we don't get back and forth in this two-way thing during citizen comments, but I see you have.
Well, you asked for direction, and God knows I have confessions I could put on there, but I will say that I think this is really going down the wrong path, because this is an easy one, but we're going to put ourselves in a situation where it's not going to be an easy one. And once you start, I don't see it there being an easy solution. I don't think that we want to get in the business of allowing a confession board. Once we start that, then there's so many easy tangents you can go from there that would not be as appealing. And so, even though I think it's a neat idea, I would not support putting it on the city-owned property. And even further, I wouldn't support us creating a policy to try to allow it, because I believe just by creating the policy, then you're going to open yourselves up to all sorts of different levels of interpretation. And then we have to keep going back to the attorney. We have to put our city manager in a position to figure out, does he want to make that decision, or is he going to bring it to the council? Then it has to come back to us. And it's a process and a loop that I don't think, there's too many variables that we don't know.
I tend to agree with you. Well, I think it's a great idea. I don't know that it's a good idea for city property. Anybody else? Councilmember Sperry.
So when we say city property, are we including our public parks?
We're looking at parks. We're looking at.
So I'm hearing. So is that what I'm hearing? Yeah. So I would not support spending a lot of staff time and resources trying to create a policy for something like this. I don't know if I have watched the video, and the way it looked to me was it looked like that it's more like a special event that a group was putting on, and it looks like they were like at Green Lake, so people were just walking by. So maybe if we spent maybe next week kind of think it through, because to me it doesn't feel, I think we're showing how government makes things complicated. My guess is that the people the organization who's doing this in Seattle probably did not approach any governmental body to ask for approval. They just sort of showed up here and there. So I don't know if that's confusing or not, but I don't support going down this track of trying to create some policy on what's put on a confession board. But I did, as I said, I had the opportunity to view the video, and to me, it's one of those out-of-the-box things that we want to encourage our citizens to come up with. So if there's a simple way to allow this as just a special event, or, as long as there's no problems, let them do it, it's fine, that kind of thing. I'd love to see that, but I'm not sure we can do that. So,
Anybody else? Okay.
The only thing I'm thinking about is our special event permit that we allow people to have in city parks. We could check our special event policy and see if they could apply for this under a special event. And if our special event policy and legal framework supports it, then that might be a way to do it.
Okay.
Rather than drafting a whole new policy.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Hurwitz.
Is there a difference between placing it in on city hall property or a park versus just having it in a sidewalk right of way? As far as liability or precedent setting or...
My initial thought is no. Because I think what we're talking about is maybe a portable sign. And you've probably heard a lot about portable sign issues arising in other cities when they're used for commercial purposes, political speech purposes. I haven't taken a look at the video, and it would be helpful for me to see exactly how this is monitored during the day. It sounds like it might be more like a special event, as the city manager said, more than a sign situation.
All right. Are you?
I think what we'll do is we'll direct her to come in for a special event permit and go from there and process it like we would any other.
Okay. Is that agreeable? Fine. All right. Mr. Giles, Mr. Huxtable, thank you for your comments. A little side note, over 25% of the homeless population are seniors, and that's a huge number. And these are people that the chances are have worked their whole lives and paid into the system and now end up homeless. Anyway, thank you for your comments, and you're right, we will be acting on the arch issue tonight. All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I'll second, moved and seconded. If there are no objections, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda stands approved unanimously. The next item on the agenda then is a public hearing. Public hearing to receive public testimony regarding ordinance number 15-0410, adopting 2016 road standards. Mrs. Overlease, anything you care to add to our discussion? Do we have any questions for?
Was that Zach going to present? Thought he was.
Her name is first, and that's why I was calling on her.
Okay, well,
Zach.
he was getting
No,
up.
that's fine, that's fine. If you're happy, I think we're happy. I don't see any questions here. And I see Mr. Richardson back there, and he doesn't seem to have anything earth-shattering at this point. So let's declare the public hearing open to receive public testimony regarding ordinance number 15-0410, adopting 2016 road standards. Clerk, please call the first person.
There's no one signed up.
Anybody wishing to be heard? Anybody wishing to be heard on the 2016 road standards? Anybody wishing to be heard? If not, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Next item on the agenda is to adopt ordinance number 15-0410, the City of Kenmore 2016 road standards. Ms. Overlease, Mr. Richardson.
He's under the weather, so he can keep his distance.
Good evening, council members. So hopefully this is the last time we have to touch the road standards for this adoption. The public hearing we just completed was done in response to one of the changes that we made. It was recommended by the city attorney that we go through that process again. So I just wanted to run through. We did receive two public comments during our comment period and review. We did review those. One comment had to do with the two-lot short plat exemption, and the other comment had to do with the redefining the flag lot frontage. And so we reviewed those, and we're not recommending any changes as a result of those comments. We do have one change that gives us a little more flexibility in unique circumstances, but that's not necessarily changing the requirements for either of those scenarios. We think that not changing those is consistent with the direction that you guys have provided, as well as the current council goals, and it's just a better for pedestrian safety in the long run. And that's what I want to say. The impacts that we're assessing can be clearly justified and are directionally proportional to the size of the lot, so we feel legally everything is well covered. So we did make a couple minor changes to the road standards since the last time we discussed them with you guys. They're briefly summarized in the Appendix D of your agenda bill. Just going to run through them real quick, and if you have any questions, please let me know. The change that actually triggered the public hearing was a change to allow an exception for adaptive reuse projects of historically recognized sites. This is a pretty standard exemption that exists in other cities in the area, and was brought to our attention by the assistant city manager, and so we went ahead and incorporated that change into this. Again, this only applies to registered historic sites, and it still requires that they provide safe and adequate access. It may not require the full list of the frontage improvements as they're in the book. The other minor change we added was some additional language to the frontage improvement requirement section, which really recognized the fact that there's a lot of really unique situations here in Kenmore, given that we've developed under so many different codes and been handed down from the county, that the standards really can't account for every situation. And so the language in this section just gives us a little more flexibility in saying, okay, well, that's not meeting the intent. Let's apply it as the intent is, which is to get a road. We don't want to end up with a road which is fully developed but does not have pedestrian improvements. So it just gives a little more flexibility in a unique circumstance where it doesn't make sense. It gives us that ability to say, okay, we're not meeting the intent there. The other changes were relatively even more minor than that. We did update to the downtown improvement maps. We added some patterns to that so it could be distinguished by both pattern and color. The residential access roads for residential collectors, which are the big roads for 50 lots or more, we had several discussions about the design speed on that road, and we did end up lowering it from 35 to 30. 30 is about the lowest we think we can go, but we did end up lowering that by 5 miles per hour. And then the last one was just a quick detail update. We missed some driveway wings on one of our details, and so we added that. But other than that, everything else in the standards is the same as the previous drafts you've seen, and we hope you will consider it for adoption today.
Any questions? Councilmember Herbig.
I just wanted to thank you guys for all your work. I know that this is a fairly monumental task as far as these things go, so thank you. Great job. Appreciate it.
And
Any other questions?
I'm just going to add that this was definitely a larger, Zach was our lead and he did great, but also Debbie's team, Brian's team, I think at least half of the city manager's office. So he was our fearless leader, but it was a lot of work for a lot of people over a long period of time.
Yeah.
So thank you to my colleagues and their team as well.
So Zach did a lot of the work, and I guess you're the one I can blame too, right?
Yep, that'll be me.
'Cause I got it too now, so probably came from you. I got to blame somebody. Any other questions? That's it. Move away. Move away. Deputy Mayor.
No, I'm fine.
Oh, you're just
fine, thanks.
Okay.
All good with it. Yeah.
Anybody else? All right. So the chair will entertain a motion then to adopt ordinance number 15-0410. Relating City of Kenmore 2016 road census. Has been moved. Second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
6-0.
Yay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. That was a big job, I know. Next item on the agenda is the Regional Coalition for Housing Administrative Budget and Work Program. Ms. Owsley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have two items related to Regional Coalition for Housing, also known as ARCH. I'm joined tonight by Arthur Sullivan, the Executive Director. The first item that we'll be discussing is the ARCH 2016 Administrative Budget and Work Program. And as you know, the interlocal agreement that our city and a number of other cities signed several years ago requires that each year each city council approves the administrative budget and the work program for ARCH. So just very briefly, the administrative budget hasn't changed very much, gone up about 3%, and Kenmore's contribution to that administrative budget went up about 3%, up to $27,519, and you'll also see attached to the agenda bill the work program for ARCH for 2016, and then a summary of what ARCH plans to be doing with the member cities. And you'll notice that they're going to be doing a lot of work with our city and a number of others on housing strategies. And I know this is something that you discussed at your retreat this year, and so we look forward to working on that important topic with ARCH. So with that, Arthur and I will take any questions.
Questions? None. Mr. Sullivan, I missed the opportunity to work with you on the JRC and see some of these projects firsthand, so it's good to see them come in front of us now, at least.
Look forward to working with you here.
When you have one. No questions? All right. Thank you. I guess we move then on to the next item. Is that correct?
Mayor, did you want to ask for a motion to approve?
On the work plan?
Yes, and an administrative budget.
Sure, we can certainly do that. Is there a motion then to go ahead and accept and approve the 2016 work plan and administrative budget?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Let's be consistent. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
6-0.
Next item on the agenda is adopt resolution number 16-272, authorizing execution of the documents necessary to fund housing projects recommended by a regional coalition for housing. Mrs. Owsley.
Thank you, Mayor. Before you is the resolution authorizing that documents be executed for the resolution really speaks to one of the two housing projects that have been approved for this year's funding round from the Housing Trust Fund at Arch. Kenmore is being asked to use about $15,000 of the money that you budget every year for the Housing Trust Fund at Arch. And this particular project is the one that you heard about earlier at Totem Lake. And I'm going to ask Arthur to talk a little bit about that project as well as the other one that was approved for funding this year, because it involves CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds that the city also has an interest in, but the direct contribution is going to the Totem Lake, the Imagine Housing project. Every year, in this biennium, the budget has $30,000 from Kenmore going to the trust fund, and so you'll see that the cash balance at the end of 2015 was just over $74,000. This $15,000 will come out of that balance, and there is still $30,000 to be deposited in 2016. So with that, I'll ask Arthur to explain a little bit about these two very worthy projects, and particularly the Imagine Housing one.
Right, so you're being, as Assistant City Manager Owsley mentioned, you're being asked to act on the one project that involved your general fund dollars. The memorandum and material we provided you is for two projects. You did hear testimony tonight from representatives from Imagine Housing for the Totem Lake project, which is the one we're proposing general fund dollars for. It is actually a comeback because we originally funded about 3 years ago, but took longer to pull together some of the other funding sources. Your funds combined with the other cities would be a total of $1.1 million. In a project that will have an expense probably closer to $9 million or more dollars. So it's a relatively good leveraging. It's at $11,000 per unit, even with the additional funds. So it's still a very good investment, we find. The materials that you have are summaries of the project and all the funding sources that are proposed, so you can see all those different pieces of funding, as well as a little summary of the project. This one is for 91 units for seniors, including a set aside for formerly homeless seniors. We do have other conditions about receiving funding from all the other sources being committed before our funds go out the door. So the funds you committed earlier are still waiting, because the conditions are all waiting to be met. And so this is a project that's also sort of a partner project with a project that was completed several years ago, also by Imagine Housing. That's for families, including some household and singles for homeless. So this is one of our conditions, is to make sure they have a management plan on how those two sites will integrate, because they are literally adjacent to one another, and taking advantage from management of co-managing the two properties. So that is one of the funding conditions we have. The other project is also by Imagine Housing, and it's a little bit earlier in the stage. It's in the city of Bellevue on church property that the city has just completed the other night, rezoning and comprehensive plan amendments to allow a portion of that church property to be redeveloped with housing on it. What we have asked, and why we are asking for funding, why I'm bringing it up, is that you are part of the CDBG consortium. And so this will be a recommendation that goes to that group, that funds set aside for there from housing, that those funds be used this year for that project. And it's mostly for pre-development. There's a lot of issues, complexity with the site. So we want them to sort of get a head start on applying for the other funds, to look at issues such as parking, co-management, because that's the site where some of you may have gone a couple years ago, where we did our Housing 101 and there was the women's shelter in the ground level area of that property. So again, how do you co-manage a property where you have families with this group, and how do you take advantage of that? Parking issues, it's a complex site, there's sensitive environmental portions of the site, so making sure that those issues are all worked out. And so our funds are actually to help with some of the pre-development work associated with that. If that all's going well, then we've got conditions in here to spend potentially a little bit more, to start getting into some of the design, more detailed design work, as well as potentially for some of the land expenses associated with tying up that property. So again, the memo you have summarizes the project, the number of conditions that must be met, and then also some summary charts as well. So I'll stop there. And that's intended to be for families. That property, around 50 to 60 units, depending on, or up to 65. Hope to have some larger units. That's one of the things we want to explore. We also want to look at help working with a service agency in the community, so that the disabled units that are set aside are serving a higher need population. So a number of issues that came up in the advisory board's review that we want to explore with Imagine Housing further with. So those are all outlined in the memorandum that we forwarded to you.
Questions? It's nice to see that Total Lake, they're finally going to do something with it. So.
And we really appreciate the efforts of the Citizens Advisory Board in reviewing these applications. Yeah.
All right, if there are no further questions, then Chair will entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 16272 to authorize the execution of documents necessary to fund housing projects recommended by Arch. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve that resolution number 16272.
A second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda. Approve agreements authorizing the transfer of Twin Springs property from King County to the city. The contracts number 16-C1508 and 16-C1509. Ms. Spence.
Good evening, Council. So tonight we're asking for Council authorization to move forward with two documents that would lead to the transfer of the Brightwater property, which I think we know as the Twin Springs property, from King County to the city. And joining me this evening is Michael Poppany with King County. And I have to say that we're old enough to have been with this project from the very beginning. So it's sort of exciting that after all the years of planning and the construction and everything else, that we're finally here before you to look for the transfer of this property. And that will be a great asset for the city as a park property and open space. So to create the property, we will have to record a boundary line adjustment, and that will create the two parcel boundaries. One parcel, which is about 1.46 acres, will be retained by the county so that they have access to their Brightwater portal facilities. The remainder of the property, almost 26 acres, will be transferred to the city. And I know you're all familiar with the site. The approximate western third of the site is pretty steep and it's wooded. There is a large wetland area along the property frontage, about 7 acres, and then there's a remainder of the property in the middle. And we worked pretty hard with King County during their construction process to try and keep as level an area as we could in the center of the property that the city could then use for sort of park development, whether that's a parking area or some other uses, and those park uses are, I guess, to be determined. So the two documents, there is an interagency agreement, and that outlines the terms and conditions for use and maintenance of the transferred property. And these conditions come from the original 2007 transfer agreement and permit conditions. And as you can imagine, there were many, many permits related to this project. So some of the key conditions, the property must be used going forward for a public park. The large on-site wetland, which is marked by a split rail fence, must be maintained as a wetland mitigation area. And the county has responsibility for maintenance and monitoring of that wetland area until January 1st, 2025. Then the city takes over maintenance. Similarly, there are streams on the site, two streams which give the name Twin Springs, flow across the property. There is also a stream within the wetland area and a drainage channel. And again, the county is responsible for maintenance and monitoring of those streams and ensuring that the stream flow is maintained through January 1st, 2025. Then it becomes the city's responsibility. The county also has responsibility for maintaining the temporary irrigation and landscaping until January 2017. And also, so that's sort of some of the key points from the interagency agreement. The quitclaim deed is sort of the document which then formally transfers the property to the city, outlines several easements within there that the county needs to be able to maintain the infrastructure associated with the Brightwater property, the various tunnels and things that flow under the site that support that regional facility. The main access to the site is a paved driveway on the north end of the site, and that underlying property would be owned by the county, and so that's why we need an access agreement so that the city has the right to also access the property. Once the city develops the property as a park or starts that process, then the maintenance costs for that maintaining the driveway access will be split equally between the county and the city. So those are sort of the main points of the documents that we're asking for authorization. The next step would be if staff is recommending that you pass a motion this evening granting the authorization to execute the necessary documents for the transfer. And then once we have the property in hand, I would say that the next step, we would say staff will, in the future, bring back to council some recommendations and options for how that park should be open to the public. I don't think we're ready immediately upon transfer to open the park. We'd like to make sure that we are ready, that we understand, things like some of the logistics, whether it's parking or trash pickup or opening the park or whatever, we have those in place. So I know that you're all anxious to use this. We just want to make sure that we are ready for the public to be able to use it. So all that being said, Michael and I are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Councilmember Smith.
Hi, thanks for being here tonight, Michael. I have a question on the second page under key conditions. And it has to do with the maintenance of the access driveway, that we pay 50% of the cost to the county. I'm just wondering, is there any? Can you tell me what kind of expenses we could expect for maintenance of that driveway?
Well, for us, we'll probably access that property once a week. And so very little traffic on that driveway. We set it up as, a sharing of those expenses, thinking that, your city and your park users would be the majority of the users there. And so we felt that it was fair, more than fair, that we agreed to split any maintenance fees that were required for that roadway. So I believe that it would depend on your level of use, how you develop the parkland in the future and how many people use it on a consistent basis.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the only other question I had was, if after January 2017, and this is, I guess, for either one of you, what happens if the vegetation in the sensitive areas dies or does not continue to grow as expected, are we 100% responsible at that point, or what is the plan?
There are two things. So the vegetation that's in the wetland area has to be maintained till January 1st, 2025. The landscaping, which is to 2017, is sort of the plantings that are on the hillside. So those are the two plantings, and it's we've already done an inspection, and they look pretty healthy right now. So they should continue to be healthy, and the county is responsible for making sure they stay healthy till 2017. So the 2017 has nothing really to do with the wetland plants.
Okay. And so if they die, though, on the ones on the hillside, does that mean we as a city have to go in the spring of 2017 and replace all the dead ones at our expense?
Hopefully that we'll have figured it out before 2017 that those plants are going to survive long term.
Okay.
But after 2017, if something happens, it's on the city's responsibility to then replace them or maintain them.
Okay.
That's the hillside only.
I'm sorry?
That's the hillside
That's the
only.
hillside plants, and it's after 2025 that we take on the responsibility of the wetland area.
If blackberries come back, it's on the county's dollar in the wetlands.
The county is responsible till 2025 to make sure that the plantings are healthy. They have to submit monitoring reports, which sort of is a way to check the progress of those that are being maintained. So yes, they have to make sure that it's clear of invasives, and they have to replace any dead plants during that time period.
Councilmember Danuski, the Deputy Mayor.
My question is more on the opening of the park. I know a lot of people have been waiting for this for a long time, and it's the only park in that quadrant of the city. So they're eagerly awaiting access. I don't have a problem with not opening it on day one, but in the agenda packet it says we're waiting until the whole interim use plan is developed, and when is that going to be done, I guess? When are we planning to figure that out?
So, well, I don't know if you want to take a step.
Go right ahead.
Well, so it's in the queue. We haven't started on that, and we haven't even selected the consultant yet. It's just one of those projects that we'd like to get to, but we just haven't had the resources to. Good news is we're recruiting for a parks project manager position full-time. It's a 2-year temporary position, but the first review of applications, I think, is today or tomorrow, right?
Yes.
And we've gotten a good handful of applications to look through. So once that person gets on board, that they'll be able to be helping us with projects like this.
I guess I'd like to see it open before that whole process, if it's possible. But.
So I guess that's what we'd have to take a look at is if it's possible to open the park before the interim plan's in effect, and what does that mean? So it could be a 2-stage process, but what that means, Councilmember Danuski, I'm not sure at this point.
So I could see just going through the community process for the interim plan, taking all of this year.
Yeah.
And then whatever improvements we need to do for the interim plan would be into 2017. That said, there's actually a lot that goes into opening a park. And what I'd like to do, if you're interested in opening the park ASAP, what I'd like to do is have Debbie work with Jennifer and come back to you in the very near future to tell you about all the things that go into opening a park, and then get your guidance at that point.
Sounds good to me. I don't know if everybody else is interested in that as well.
And
And
that
I was
park-
thinking more just opening the gates and letting people kind of use it as a passive area.
So I wish it was that simple, and I thought it was too, but I've been educated by my coworkers
I need to be educated.
that it's not that simple.
This park
So-
has not been master planned either, has it? It's not part of our master plan.
No.
Nope.
Not at all. Okay. Other questions? Deputy Mayor.
It may be buried in all this somewhere, but you see all those white pipes watering all that. And it always struck me kind of funny as to why, if it is a wetland, why do we have to water it? And secondly, what are we watering it with? Is it your reclaimed water from Brightwater that is being used, or is it city water that we're using to water it?
I believe that that's potable water that's being used.
Isn't there underneath there a purple pipe that has reclaimed water in it?
There is a reclaimed
underneath the
water
portal.
line. I don't believe in this location it's been brought to the surface yet, based on having a number of users in that particular area. So the availability is there for the future. Our reclaimed water division is working on, establishing a customer base and making that available in the different possible locations. The reason that you see those pipes is because they're all meant to be a temporary irrigation system. Normally, even our native plants need 3 years of irrigation during our very dry summer periods to establish themselves. And after they're established, then they can maintain on their own through dry periods. And so, that's how it's been set up there. And we're due to take out those pipes when they're no longer needed for that irrigation. And so that's part of our responsibility unless the city decides they'd like to keep them in place for some particular time period or reason.
Okay, that leads me to another question. Whose water meter, is running those pipes? Will it be ours or yours?
It's ours.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in 2025, when this is turned over to the city, what if we have a series of dry summers like we have had, and this is no longer a wetland unless we force it to be a wetland by watering it? Will it ever, if nature doesn't want it to be a wetland, do we have to keep watering it so it is a wetland?
I think nature wants it to be a wetland. And
Well,
I
you
think
think,
it should,
but-
yes. Well,
Why do we have to water it at all, even in the beginning, if it's a wetland?
Because I'm not a wetland
Okay.
hydrologist.
Best
here at
available
all.
science. Yeah, I know.
I'm not. But I mean, it's like any plant. In order to get it growing efficiently, you need to give it the right conditions.
Okay.
And so that's what we're hearing is you have to provide those conditions to get it established. Once it's established, it's like any other native area. It kind of takes care of itself.
But I'll have to say, you're raising some very good questions about, how will the Army Corps of Engineers, deal with our long-term future if we are affected by climate change in that way and our wetlands change with the climate of this region. I mean, I think it's something that, everyone will have to confront. It's our responsibility to keep it up and functioning till 2025. And who knows? I mean, we may be dealing with that same condition in that 10-year time frame and working with the Army Corps of Engineers to understand what the responsibility would be if, in fact, there is a dramatic change because of climate.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But I think also about 80th, and when that was put through and built up to be a nice road there, it essentially functions as a dam across there. And I would imagine if 80th hadn't been run through there as a road, an elevated road as it is, that it might not be the same character of wetland had it been left to its own devices to be a wetland without our interference with the road.
Yeah.
So, things do change, and I'm just wondering if nature actually changes it to a drier thing, are we forced to continue it being a wetland?
I think it leads to a discussion with the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of Ecology. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion authorizing the city manager to execute contract number 16-01508, the interagency agreement between King County and the city of Kenmore relating to Brightwater property and the transferred Twin Springs property, along with the associated surface access easement agreement, contract number 16-01509.
So moved. Are you done?
And I'll second. That's two or one? Mr. Casaguma, can we do 2 for 1? Or you want to do 2? 2 for 1. All right. Motion then is to Authorize city manager to execute contract number 16-C1508, the interagency agreement, along with the easement contract number 16-C1509. Any further discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's ours.
Almost, once we've got the documents approved. Yes.
I would just like to thank the city for working with King County over our many years of construction on the Brightwater project. This mitigation agreement was signed with your city back in 2005. I was sitting at a smaller table and a smaller desk back then. But and so I would just like to say that it's been a pleasure working with your city and your professional staff over the years. Debbie has done a fabulous job working with us on this series of agreements. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bent, it's just you and I, right? That we're here then for this signing, this original.
Very likely. And again, this is one of those projects that's probably involved every city department and staff in some way or another. In every project, it always takes a village.
There's been a lot of work done on that over the years, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we really enjoyed the sales tax during the Brightwater Portal project. And
yes, we did.
If you ever want to build any more tunnels 200 feet under the ground in Kenmore, we'll be happy to accommodate you.
Yes, we were the benefits of that just after the streamlined sales tax went in. We reaped the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next item on the agenda, 2016 docket work program for the Planning Commission. Mrs. Bent.
Thank you, Mayor, and Laurie Anderson is going to join me too. So tonight we're here with the annual docket for the Planning Commission. This is something that you take action on to assign the annual work program for the Planning Commission. We have included a table in the agenda which gives a staff recommendation, also outlines some work program items which we're recommending be on your agenda later in next year, and also we've identified things which might be on future docket items. So I'd now like to ask Laurie to kind of step through the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. So, as Debbie mentioned, tonight the Council will decide on the 2016 docket for the Planning Commission. Typically, there's enough time in the Planning Commission schedule to address one major project and maybe a couple of smaller projects. This past year, it was successful to identify a smaller project that could be brought forward if they finished their work early, which they did, and so we are making a similar recommendation this year. Every year, I wanted to mention, private applicants have an opportunity to request changes either to the comprehensive plan or to development regulations. There's a 1-month application period in the fall, and if those requests are made, those come forward as well. We did not have any applications this year, so there are no private applications before you for consideration tonight. So for 2016, staff is recommending 3 projects. The first one is to complete rewrite of the city's communication facilities regulations. This was something you approved on the docket actually last year. This was the project that the Planning Commission turned to at the end of the year. So they are more than halfway finished with this project, and I expect the recommendation will be coming forward to you later this spring. This is a project to look at wireless communication facilities, both in response to some new federal rules, but also as a way to go through this chapter and clarify some points that have been causing some ongoing interpretation problems. So again, we're recommending that this project be finished. The second item that we're recommending is the housing strategy plan. This was an implementation measure in the housing element of the comprehensive plan that you adopted last year. And this housing strategy plan would be something that the Planning Commission would work through with ARCH, Regional Coalition for Housing, and I know that you discussed this at your retreat, and that the council too would play a significant early role in this project if you were to place it on the docket. And finally, the project that we would turn to complete the year would be a review of the neighborhood business zone. This is a very small zone. There are only 2 places in the city. Both are on Juanita Drive, at the intersection of Northeast 153rd and at the intersection of Northeast 170th Street. It's the last holdover King County zoning district in the city, and so we would like to give the Planning Commission the opportunity to clean up the last commercial zone in the city. This project actually would involve comprehensive plan amendments. So those are the 3 projects that staff is recommending move to the docket. The projects that staff would anticipate bringing forward directly to the council, there are 4 of those, and as you know, if there are no comprehensive plan amendments required, if a project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, it can go straight to the City Council and does not need to go through the Planning Commission. So the 4 projects, those 4 projects, and this isn't directly tied to the docket, but certainly as a work program item, we want you to think about this. One would be revising all of the remaining zoning districts to use the new list of standardized land uses. You may recall several years ago we went through a process of taking a whole bunch of uses and consolidating them down into about 50 land uses, and we would like to use those same land uses in every zoning district. So this is an administrative task, not to change uses, but to just clarify and make it consistent throughout the code, streamlining measure. The second item would be revisiting the public agency and utility exception to the critical area rules. This was a section that was written in 2006, and then an interpretation in 2009 determined that it could only be applied to utilities. We would like to revisit that. It's been on our list of things to do for several years. The third thing is amendments addressing medical marijuana. As you know, the state legislature in their last session adopted a couple of different bills that folded the medical marijuana system into the recreational marijuana system, and there are some policy issues that we would like to bring forward and discuss with you to determine direction on those items. And lastly, we're recommending that we look at apartments in single-family zones. There are some allowances currently in the single-family zones in unique circumstances for apartments to be developed, and I think this was something we wanted to bring forward and give you all a chance to discuss. So those are the recommendations.
Questions? No questions, and
I do have one comment.
Yeah, please.
It's not a question, but it has to do with on the matrix with the work plan, and under transportation for the parking standards, it says 2017 and beyond. Does that plus mean that it would start in 2017 and it could take longer, or does it mean it will be past some year in the future, past 2017?
That's the second point.
The second one? Mm-hmm. Okay. So knowing that, I would ask that, as I know it won't affect 2016, but I would like to see us try to deal with that sooner rather than later, because I think it's going to be an issue that right here in the downtown central core here will be a significant issue. And I just think the longer we wait, the harder it may be to implement some of the plans or changes that we would want to.
Okay.
Councilmember Herberg.
What exactly, I'm sorry, is CTR ordinance?
Commute trip reduction.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm used to for that acronym, but I was just not used to that in this context, so, okay.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, so then we need direction to authorize the Planning Commission's 2016 docket. You want a formal motion, or you're happy with direction to proceed? What would you like?
I think that the zoning code actually sets out that a decision is made, so probably a formal motion.
So then, the Chair will entertain a motion to approve the Planning Commission's 2016 docket.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Danuski and Herbig. All right. Any further discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
6-0.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Discussion and potential ordinance regarding consumption, sale, possession, and service of alcoholic beverages in city parks and the parks zone. Mr. Hampson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you all might know, we currently have inconsistencies between the criminal code and the zoning code as it relates to the consumption, sale, possession, and service of alcoholic beverages in city parks and in the park zone. The park rules in the criminal code prohibit the consumption and sale, possession, and service of alcoholic beverages in city parks, recreation areas, and associated marine areas, whereas the service of alcoholic beverages is prohibited in the zoning code except through a temporary use permit or temporary use of facilities as approved through Chapter 9. Unfortunately, we've sent mixed messages to local businesses, and specifically a local brewery who we were telling to come in for a temporary special events permit to permit a activity or event in one of our city parks, and unfortunately one section of the code was this is the way you do it, and the other section of the code was saying you can't do it. And so without getting into too many of all the uncertainties regarding the different possibilities between these two code sections, I'm recommending that Kenmore Municipal Code Section 9.40, .10, 9.40.590, 9.40, 600, and 18.28.020 Table A are revised. And these recommendations would allow alcoholic beverages to be served at a city park through a special events permit or a permitted use, and with the approval of the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Control Board. So with the help of the city attorney's offices, we've drafted some proposed changes to those sections in which they would do, those changes would define what a city park is. And so the proposed definition of a city park is a land that's designated as a park in the City Park Recreation and Open Space Plan section of the comprehensive plan or any other city ordinance. We would delete the recreation area, reword the prohibition, the prohibited acts to clearly distinguish between selling, opening a container, and possessing an open container and consuming. Delete the obsolete or never corrected fairgrounds term, which is probably just a carryover from the King County time. And in the Table A of the zoning code, 1828.020, in the prohibited column, retain the marijuana businesses as a prohibited use, but delete the remaining sections in that column, the remaining language in that column. So that's the...
So, just clarification. You've been saying city parks, city parks, city parks. What does this have to do with state parks? Anything?
Well, there is in the zoning code, it's a parks zoning.
Okay.
And so the state parks are zoned in the park zone. And so by cleaning up Chapter 18, that's what deals with the state parks.
So we're dealing with city parks, not state parks?
We're dealing with both.
With the
both.
cleanup.
Park zone.
Okay.
Park zone and city parks.
Okay. Councilmember Sperry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, thank you, Brian. When I read that Kenmore Fairgrounds, I was pretty confused. So I think obviously this needed some work. I think what would help me is right now, in theory anyway, we have no alcohol in city parks. So if we go ahead and adopt these changes, these recommended changes, how is that going to change?
So let me see if I understood that correctly. If we adopt these proposed changes, how is it going to affect the alcohol sales in the city parks?
Anything zone park, I guess, yeah.
Anything zone park. So currently, the only thing that you can do through alcoholic beverages in a city zone park would be through a special event permit or a temporary use permit, which is limited to 90 days. And so by these changes, this would allow an established permitted use to serve and sell, consume alcoholic beverages.
Okay.
Councilmember Smith.
Generally, this seems to make sense, and I don't have a problem with it. I am curious to know, though, have you thought any at all about some of the smaller parks and impacts maybe that, and I'm thinking of anything from Linwood Park to North Shore Summit to Morelands Park right next to a school, an elementary school. And to me, I wouldn't have a problem with like the local parks that are kind of down by our central business core, but I would probably be less desirable in some of these little tiny or smaller pocket parks, neighborhood parks.
We have had this discussion, and I can see both sides of it. You know, there could be these neighborhood block parties that occur, and they can use a portion of the smaller parks to accommodate some of those services or needs. Whereas in a larger waterfront park, I think it would be a different creature. It could be more a public interaction where you're setting up a public booth and people from the general public are invited, whereas you might get a different animal in a smaller park where it's just a invitation, a smaller gathering of the local residents.
So if 10 neighbors, say, let's take North Shore Summit, let's say 10 neighbor houses right in that community decided they wanted to have a neighborhood party there and get a keg and enjoy their Sunday afternoon, what process would they have to go through to do that?
To do that, let's say in the road, in the right-of-way, or
no,
in the cul-de-sac?
At the park.
At the park?
At North Shore Summit Park.
If this was approved and adopted, they would have to go through the special events permit and also go through the approval process through the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Control Board.
What does that entail? Of just ballpark? I mean, can you tell
So
me
they
a little
have regulations that are established for any kind of beer gardens or any kind of other alcoholic activities that could talk about, fencing, who's minors. So they have insurance, so other rules and stuff that they have set in place that they've been doing a long time.
Okay. Was that something that people would have to go out and get a liability insurance policy for as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Along those same lines, for example, in Kirkland Summerfest, they have a beer garden down on the water usually, and it's fenced off, and minors don't get in there, and it's separated from the rest of the park. I didn't notice that in the print here, but would that be the way this would be used in our local parks, or is it just a free-for-all and anybody can come and go and kids can mingle through where people are drinking, or how is it regulated and structured?
So it definitely wouldn't be a free-for-all. This wouldn't give anybody the permission to just bring alcoholic beverages into one of our parks. They'd have to go through the special event permit. It'd get routed internally to all of the other different departments, including the police department, fire department, and also they'd have to have the Liquor Control Board separate permit and approval from them, and they would establish, what ages could attend, and I think it's based on what the actual event is, as if it's a full-blown beer garden versus a barbecue, it could be two different rules and regulations.
Okay.
So, it had a really tough meeting during the day. And by golly, I want to go and buy some good barbecue and a nice bottle of wine and go to the park and just have a nice picnic with my wife. Can I do that?
Not under our current code and not under our new code, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay. City Manager.
So as I'm sure you know, we're not asking for you to vote on an ordinance tonight, but we would like your direction on what to bring back as an ordinance to adopt. And on this big parks versus small parks thing, I think that's the thing we need your direction on the most. There is a memo in your packet from our Chief of Police and Public Works Operations Manager about it. Given their thoughts on it, and the more I've thought about it and kind of molded over in my mind, my thought would be to maybe not allow it at all in little parks, and but allow it in our bigger parks like Rhododendron, Log Boom, obviously the state park, and Town Green, obviously, because of the retail use that's going to be there. So that's my recommendation, but you guys tell me what you'd like to do. And again, the recommendation is it would be special temporary use permit in the big parks. And then obviously if, for example, a restaurant were to establish itself in the state park, then that would be an ongoing permitted use and that would be allowed.
What about a restaurant bordering a park?
If it's not in
dining in the park.
Yeah, if it's in the parks zone.
Town Green.
Yeah, so that would be for one thing, the Town Green's not in a parks zone, but it could still be interpreted as a park. So but it would be an ongoing permitted use, and that would therefore be allowed.
Councilmember Herbig.
I'm not sure that I agree that we need to separate big parks from small parks. But if we do go that route, I think lumping Squires in with the larger parks might make some sense because of how many folks gather there for larger events. So I wouldn't want to lump it in with, say, Morelands and Linwood personally.
Well, Laura, I think Squires you put him, is over 40-some acres, so yeah.
Right, it wasn't in what he listed earlier, and I just didn't want it to get left
Right, and you can actually call out the parks specifically that you want in or out.
So that would be the approach that I would think makes more sense, is to actually exclude parks that would not permit it. I think that would be easier, especially not knowing what's going on with the Town Green exactly and how, since it's not in a park zone, but if we were just to, I don't know that that's the right answer, but I would prefer, I think, to figure out if we know there's a park that we don't want to be part of this and we just want to have alcohol prohibited, that would be a lot easier, I think, than
Potentially, I can agree with you. Rhododendron, all of the small kids playing there.
Yeah,
and everything else, yet we have the
But
picnic
here's,
areas.
I mean, we're talking, first of all, you have a picnic shelter that's rented all summer long, and then we're talking about building a boathouse and a boardwalk and a connection to the waterfront. It would make no sense to me to do this policy then exclude rhododendron. But I would say I wouldn't have a problem excluding Morelands. I think is a no-brainer because it's right by an elementary.
Or the Summit.
And the North Shore Summit and Linwood.
Or Linwood, yeah, okay. I think we're...
So I have a classification and inventory. This is from the actual PROS plan. I'll pass it out to you, and it talks about the different types of parks that we have, and it might be easier.
Thanks, Brian.
It might be easier to classify that when you see it, because it sounds like you're saying that you would like to exclude the neighborhood parks as they're classified in our pros plan.
So that's probably the easiest way to do it then, is just to refer to it as the neighborhood parks in our pros plan, or what we classify as a neighborhood park, if that's what we want to do.
You know, and another way you could do it is you could, if you're talking about the Log Boom Park, Rhododendron Park, and the Squires Landing Park, then this would be for the waterfront parks. Because, you know, you're not picking up the Wallace Swamp Creek Park area, the nature parks.
Except Squires is not necessarily nature's park anymore with all the waterfront activities there.
No, but it's considered a waterfront park also.
Yeah. Sure looks like 5 acres or below 5 is the cutoff there, but anyway. Mrs. Bent.
Hello. You may be able to kind of finagle this to kind of get all the parks in a particular classification. You might not. And I think, for example, St. Edward State Park would be a challenge on finding a category because it's not a city park, and typically that's largely a nature park with only a component of it being more of a neighborhood park or a community park. So I would kind of recommend naming the parks by name. I think it would be cleaner in the ordinance to kind of know which parks are there, rather than if you have a nature park, then somebody's got to go back and try and figure out or which park you're referring to. So I think ease of implementation and being clear on which parks is to name them.
I mean, we have 3 neighborhood parks. I mean, that just jumps right out at you. Councilmember Sperry.
Yeah, I think that it makes sense to, for those 3, Linwood, Morelands, and North Shore Summit, to continue to not allow alcohol. So,
Councilmember Sperry. Councilmember Danuski.
I would kind of almost lump Wallace Swamp Creek Park in there as well, in the no alcohol one. I'd go either way on it, but I don't see it as an active type park where you'd want alcohol necessarily.
Deputy Mayor.
And where will Twin Springs Park fall?
Good point.
It's probably going to be largely a nature park or a neighborhood park, depending on what the long-term park development would be.
Well, I mean, if we ever get it, a master plan on it, I think there's a number of us would like to see some activities there, so I don't know nature park would necessarily hold for long, but...
I'd say it would probably be a split, because you'd have a large portion of the property which would be undeveloped, whether it be the wetland or the steep slope area. You have a smaller area which you may have some smaller scale development in there, more like a North Shore Summit Park kind of scale, I would say. So I would look at that being more of a neighborhood park or a nature park.
Are you looking for more from us tonight, or are we giving you sort of enough direction?
So if you wouldn't mind, which parks would you like to include?
As yes or no?
As a yes.
Well, I think I've heard rhododendron is a yes. I've heard log boom is a yes. I've heard Squires Landing is a yes.
St. Edwards. And St. Edwards.
Well, yeah, but St. Edwards is not on this list. It's not a city park, but yes.
And Town Green.
And Town Green. I mean, I'm definitely hearing no on Linwood, Morelands, North Shore Summit, and the Wallace Swamp Creek.
So can I ask you something on this, Mr. Mayor? So let's say that at Lake Point, the developer wants to create a bigger park, and we don't have his park or the park name on here, then do we have to have staff come back to us to make another change?
That's a good point. If we pick up another park along the way, do we have to add that park to that, or is this something?
This is why I think it makes sense to exclude parks rather than
include.
To include them.
That's a good point. So everything's included except what's explicitly excluded. Yes, no? Councilmember Danuski?
We could go around that circle for a while, but
Yes,
once
we
you, we are going around that circle for a while. But once you think about all the hoops that people are going to have to jump through to even get alcohol in a park, I don't know how many times people are going to want to, go to Linwood Park and go through all those hoops and jumps just to try and get a permit for that. So we may be thinking that people are going to do that more often than they would.
On all of them is what you're saying?
Throwing it out there. I'm on the fence right now, but it certainly would be easier, and I don't think that we're going to get a lot of big, huge parties over at Linwood Park.
And Brian, let's say council included Wallace Swamp Creek, for example, in this list. They didn't specifically preclude it. It was just allowed as a temporary use permit for alcohol use. When the permit comes through, administratively, we might still deny it, correct?
That's correct. This is a special event permit. It's not a land use permit. So we would still have the administrative responsibility or ability to deny a permit.
And can you explain under what circumstances we might deny it for, say, Wallace?
Yeah, Wallace really isn't set up for a gathering area. It doesn't really have any picnic benches that I'm aware of, or somewhere to have a party of that nature. So that really doesn't seem to fit the the description of a good place to have a party.
I guess some of the concerns I have on three parks, right, Linwood, Moorlands, and North Shore, is kids from the neighborhoods walk there, run there. So I don't know how happy I would be with alcohol in that park, even if it was permitted. Councilmember Herbig.
Yeah, I have to say I'm trying to get to the bottom of what people are fearing here. Are you worried that they'll just see somebody drinking a beer? I don't know. I just think we're overthinking this whole thing about jumping.
Very well could be.
I mean, jumping through the hoops with Liquor Control Board and then having to go through Brian is not a low bar for any of this.
You just called you difficult.
I think there's a bigger picture here. Is if we do it, where's the chief at? If we were to allow it, where's the chief at?
He's clear in his memo that you see in your packet.
But he will not enforce it.
Well, he will enforce the law, and so if there is public intoxication in a park and they're causing trouble, then he will deal with it. It'll be harder for him to do it when there's a permitted alcohol use in the park. So if there's a permitted temporary use alcohol permit in the park and he gets a call of public drunkenness to that park, that's going to be more difficult for him to enforce than, say, if it was just outright banned.
And I guess that's why I'm against those three neighborhood type parks.
So, just so if you don't mind, I brought up the neighborhood parks thing because I thought it was reasonable. I don't necessarily, I'm not married to that idea that we have to exclude those there. I just thought it seemed like a reasonable thing. But there's nothing in this policy that I have that big of a problem with.
Deputy Mayor.
One characteristic of parks that we haven't talked about is visibility and how much in the open are the parks. And like Rhododendron Park, people can drive in and so on. There are not hidden places within the park where things can go on unseen. Squires Landing, hey, that's a big, big park. And what's to stop in, and then how do you enforce any drunkenness or undesirable behavior out there on the peninsula between Swamp Creek and the river.
So administratively, we would not allow an alcohol use to be out on that open peninsula. It would only be in the developed Tweet property area where we would allow it.
Okay, so there's that much discretion. And you,
Yeah.
okay. But like, Squires Landing and Wallace Swamp Creek, I mean, it's not visible from the road. Something could be going on around the picnic area there. There are a few picnic tables down in there along the trail, and the police would have to get out of their cars and walk in there to see what was going on. Maybe that's another area that you wouldn't allow it. I don't know where you'd allow it in Swamp Creek Park except in the little parking lot. So I'm thinking that I'm just not comfortable with it anywhere on any of our city parks. We've had beer fests in St. Edward Park in the past on special permit. And maybe we need to change it in the park zone, but not for, I don't know why we have to allow it in any of the city parks. And if the town green's not a city park, then it wouldn't be included. Just my feelings.
It's getting clearer.
To help expedite the conversation, maybe, could I list several parks where you probably don't want it to happen, and if there's consensus, then we'll write the ordinance accordingly? Okay. Linwood, Morelands, North Shore, Wallace. Consensus on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay, you got it? You don't have consensus on the others either.
What's that? Say it
You
again?
don't have consensus on the
others either, but that's...
Well, maybe consensus was the wrong word. I was maybe
Consensus
four
that
of
they
you.
are included. You got consensus on the exclusion of those four, but that doesn't necessarily mean the others are included.
That's what I thought it meant. That the others that I didn't, the four that I didn't, or the other parks that I did not mention, I'm assuming would be allowed.
Okay. I'm opposed to it, but that's fine.
Aren't they either in or they're out? Is there something like
Well, that's the kind of the way I was thinking too, but
his comment was 1, 2, 3, 4 parks. We have consensus that they are excluded, not talking about the other parks. So
Okay.
they could be excluded or included.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was implying is that the
I don't
others
think
would
you
be-
have consensus, at least.
Yeah. What about 4 of you though? Maybe not consensus. What about
I think
4
we've
of
got 4.
Okay. All right.
Open for discussion later.
We'll come back. We'll talk more.
They're coming back with a... Okay. All right. Next item. Mr. Carlinzy, what else do you have?
A couple things. So for the love of Kenmore, we continue to see the effects from that. We've been in communications with Kenmore Air, and you may recall that the president of Kenmore Air attended the For the Love of Kenmore event last year, and as a result, he wants to do a seaplane fly-in, and they're scheduling that for May 14th, and they're going to need our support on that. Permit and otherwise. A seaplane fly-in is like a car show, but for seaplanes. And so they're going to be doing that on Saturday, May 14th, and there's going to be food trucks and all sorts of other things to go with it, so it should be pretty fun. And there's going to be some pretty cool old vintage planes there. And they're also going to be offering free seaplane rides throughout the day. So stay tuned on that. Also, another For the Love of Kenmore product is the work that Kent Sturgis and Dennis Mendry have been doing with Cal Portland. And they actually have a signed letter of agreement with Cal Portland on putting some decals, is what the term we're using, on their cement plant silos. And you may recall that they were actually the winners of this $500 mini grant that was donated by members of the community. And now that they have the letter of intent, they're ready to receive that grant. And so they've asked that they are ceremoniously given that grant at the next City Council meeting on the 16th. So speaking of the next City Council meeting, just remember that next Monday is a holiday. And so council meeting will be on Tuesday, the 16th. Also, if you look at upcoming meetings, one more meeting I'd like to insert in there is the February 29th joint meeting with the school district. And the latest I have on that, it is going to be here at 7 o'clock.
Mr. City Manager. Thank you. Is that going to be the school district and just our council, or will there be other councils, other city councils?
Just our council.
Okay.
And
Thank
the
you.
school board. Yep. And like I mentioned last time, not all of the school board will be able to be there, but we'll definitely have the superintendent there, and they'll give us an update on things that are going on with the school district and vice versa. And that's all I have.
All right. Council member, comments, reports, initiatives. Councilmember Danuski.
Mayor Baker and I have been helping a family who's having an immigration issue. So I forwarded the letter that we wrote to Delbane's office, and it got some King 5 coverage over the weekend. So hopefully we'll start getting some help for them.
Councilmember Herbig.
I'm on hour 13 today, so I got nothing to add.
Yeah, you know, I've been doing this a lot lately, and I don't envy you at all. I truly don't. Going down early in the morning and back late at night. So no, Thank you. You enjoy your job. Councilmember Sperry.
I did get to walk around Twin Springs Park, whether it was open or not. And the first thing I thought was there's absolutely no place to put any kind of access road or anything like that. So I think it's going to be a very walkable park. And the water was flowing, and it's damp, even where the wetlands are not. So I think it's going to have some value, though, for the neighborhoods, because there's a lot of development where people don't really have yards. So I think it's going to be a great open space for people. But I was pretty surprised at how wet it was.
Councilmember Smith.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
We have the ETP meeting this Friday. Are you going to be able to go, Dave?
I think so.
It's
Yes.
at a different location.
That's fine. I think I should be able to. I think I should be able to go. I had fun this week. Breakfast with the governor. That was really good. We talked about a number of issues. And
before or after Lynn Peterson?
That was before.
Okay.
So it was interesting. There was a number of us from Sound Cities, plus Representative Joan McBride, Representative, and I don't remember the others. McBride Joan is the only other one I remember that was there at this breakfast. There was 4 total. Anyway, it was really good to have one-on-one with them and with the governor. It was great. I'm expecting a phone call from Patty Murray. Her office has called today wanting my cell phone number, and she's wanting to talk about the Army Corps of Engineers budget that she has been working on. So I'm really curious now, because I didn't think we were in for anything. But she doesn't call just to say hello. So something's going on. Down this morning to Olympia to testify on the House Bill, 2667, that has got to do with the seminary building and allowing less than a unanimous decision on land use decisions and longer than 50-year lease. So we'll see what's going to happen with that. There was Representative Farrell has put in an amendment to sort of change things a little bit and allow things to happen. And we're just going to have to wait and see how that one goes. The committee was supportive, but we'll see where it ends up. I went around today to a number of different representatives getting a letter of support for our boathouse. So I was down and got signatures from Louis Moscoso from up in the Bothell and Montlake Terrace, that's what I'm looking for. Briar, yeah, Montlake Terrace, Briar, that area. I also got Cindy Ryu and Ruth Kagi for Shoreline and for those areas that we used to have. Of course, our own delegation is certainly signed on to that. But I also picked up Joan McBride for over in Kirkland and Larry Springer. So we're getting some widespread support on our boathouse. And I had lots of fun earlier this week. I went and had a dinner over in Bellevue, and I heard Peter Kagiyama, for the love of city, speak. The Bellevue Downtown Association brought him in, and so I got invited down there, and it was really good. He remembered us. And, he said hi, and he knew who I was right away and didn't really have to jog his memory, and told him about our mural that's starting and some of the other stuff, and so all the good things that have happened since he was here. And so I think he's going to come back and either work for the Downtown Association or for the City of Bellevue, or there's Mercer Island is also interested in maybe doing something. So he said he would love to come check in with us while he was here to see what's happened with us. So it's been a fun week. As Stacy has said, we wrote a letter for Mr. Tapa, and we're trying to do whatever we can do to help his family. I mean, it's such a sad thing. So, and I was also on television tonight on Como News talking about the ferry. So with that, oh, yes, sir.
I just wanted to mention tomorrow night's meeting is going to be a biggie, standing room only. I would encourage you to park far away so that people don't get discouraged when they can't find a parking space. I'm going to try to park far away. You just lost me. I lost my train of thought. So Nancy Owsley has very proactively arranged for parking spaces at Kenmore Camera, North Shore Utility District, the Kenmore Community Club. So we definitely want to get the word out. What I don't want is for someone to show up for or against and drive around and not be able to find a parking space, be frustrated, and not come to the meeting. So anything we can do to clear out our cars, that's just one more person that can hopefully not be frustrated. So.
With that, adjourn.